Thank you for the introduction, Joe. Really appreciate that. And yes, the marathon was quite a challenge. It wasn't my first one, but the marathon, I like to call it, is quite popular. And kilometer 10 till 21 is uphill. So that thing is really a beast. So this was like, I'm used to running. I run quite a bit, but this was really like not the usual experience I was hoping for, but I did it. I'm happy about that. So yes, so my background a little bit. So I'm also a Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. I'm a PST since 2010. I'm actually the first in Europe, and you can see it in the background here also. Product ownership, product is really one of the really important topics. I'm really looking at this outcome thinking, discovery of the right product, validation along those lines. And that's also my association here with the product circus. Agile Kata, which was mentioned already, and ACC, ICF. So I'm just joined the fold. So I'm probably a little bit green still behind my ears, but it was a really interesting process, which, yes, took me quite some time. So essentially, I think for me, the interest in coaching came to me during kind of end of Corona, I think something around the 22, something around that time, because everything changed somehow. And you realize that change actually only happens if people are mentally ready to do it, have it understand, have it grasped, and see the relevance of doing it, but also the willingness to do it. And I think that's the only tool we have to solve the problems we are experiencing these days, is that we need to have the mental willingness to do it with all the pros and cons and the consequences we have. And in that context, I did the brain-based coaching education with the NLI. And that was my first step to get the basic training, essentially. And then I did all the additional work for the ICF, ACC. And again, and since end of summer, I'm also kind of part of the group. And let me just check things out. Here we go. So the improvement cut, and I think most of you have seen that picture. And for me, also in the way how everything clicks together is that often people say, yeah, we are agile. We have no idea what we want to do, where we want to go, but we do something, we are agile. And that is, I'm afraid, the wrong answer. It's because it's really about, agile is about finding out what is needed to achieve a goal. So you have to have a goal in mind. And the improvement kata really helps you to get there because you set the direction of the challenge you want to get to. And this really also aligns with me with the thinking in complexity theory to some degree. You need this, what we often call the direction of travel. We don't really know exactly how we will get there and everything, but we have a clear destination somewhere in mind. It can shift over time a little bit, but overall, the direction is clear. And then really taking the step back and thinking about where are we right now? Let's say maybe some of you is intrigued now and just say, I want to run also a marathon. It's sure, great idea. That's your challenge. Good luck with it. But then find out where are you right now? Maybe you're already doing lots of sports and you have a different starting position than somebody who hadn't put on their running shoes for 20 years. And then you think about, in that context where I am, what would be the next meaningful step in the right direction, the next target condition to get there? And maybe you join a running club, maybe you just say, I'll do the 10K, which is happening in a couple of months in the neighboring city. And then you think about, how can I get there? What are the experiments or practices I could apply in order to get there? And this, for me, the improvement kata is really like a great way to wrap the scientific mindset into organizational learning or personal learning, depending on how you actually apply it. Now, on top of that, we have now the Agile Kata, which is basically taking the learning kata and such things in regards to, and I talk here about agility, but Joe also mentioned you can think about how can I get more AI-centric or something else, but what do I want to achieve within my organizations? And you establish that thinking routine, this structured thinking that fosters the organizational ethos of continuous, let's try something out, let's see what works, let's see how we can improve. And it has this forward motion to say, this is where we actually want to go. And you always try something out towards your desired target condition. And because we have this clear focus, and this is when I like to think along the lines of Donald Reinhardson, who wrote a lot and speaks a lot about flow in product development, is that By doing this, you really take out the variance to a high degree because you don't get distracted too much. You don't wander off left or right in the wrong direction. And that helps you to get more to predictable outcomes. And I think this coaching approach where with the ICF, the way I think about it strongly is that it's this crucial elements that teams don't really just go through the mechanics, through the motions, but actively really build the habit, this mental muscle, this cognitive muscle to do those changes, this intentional improvement. And I think many teams, they try something out and they just copy the behavior. And I think if you do it long enough, so essentially there's different approaches. So often in the Western culture, we often approach things like we teach people how something works and then we make them apply it. But in Asian cultures, it's often the other way around. So they just copy a behavior and over time they understand the meaning behind that. So probably you could still get there over time, but it would take really long. And I think if you help people, if you kickstart that through the coaching aspect, you have faster the convergence to what you really want to achieve. And this is really now for me where the ICF, the core competencies come into the pictures. And I did the prep work and then I did all the ICF work, and then you have to get ready for the final test essentially. And this is when you have to know the core competencies. Let's say you do a Scrum certifications, you need to know the Scrum Guide. And going through them really like again and again, they really helped me understand so many things looking back. So I wish I would have done this earlier before I did many of my practice hours and all of these things. But these 8 elements, I think they're really a strong foundation for good coaching, essentially. Like the ethical practices, what is it what we do? What is it what we want to do? Where are the boundaries? And also this coaching mindset is to how can I grow as a person? How can I help other people to grow? Make sure it's always in correct order and everything. And then once you engage with somebody, how do you make sure we understand what we're actually going to do? And I think this brings also the alignment in through this, this establishing and the maintenance of an agreement. What do we want to achieve in our coaching agreement, or what do we want to achieve through applying Agile Kata? Well, in this case, it would be the challenge, but also maybe some other things around that. Maybe establish principles around all of these elements here. And then you keep on maintaining that, because maybe you just have a quick session and just say, okay, what you want to achieve today? And this always helps people to align, get a clear focal point to work towards. And all of this only works really well if there's trust and safety in place. Now, this together, and this is then the next thing which builds on top of that, is maintains presence, to be there in the moment, to really be with the other people, a person, and empathize with them, understand them, where they're coming from. And this only works also when you are able to really listen actively, to hear them. And if you go through the certification process, you learn to, if somebody mentions the same word a couple of times, that's something which is important. That's a good chance to pick up on that and follow up and ask another question on top of that. And through this process, you really evoke the awareness that, and sometimes you ask one question and suddenly it's totally silent. You could hear a needle drop. And that's when people really go deep mentally. Oh, and you can really see how they go deep. And eventually they surface again. And maybe sometimes they smile and just say, I just had a revelation. I think this would be really helpful. And then you can work with that. And building on top of that, this is basically then how you facilitate the client growth, essentially, that they see something themselves. Because through this strong reflections, I say, I think I should be doing this. And then if you build on that, and maybe then just, okay, how can we make sure what should be in place? What do you need to make sure you can do this until, let's say, we meet again next week? And then they have something understood. It's just mostly their own idea, or it should be like that. They believe in it. They believe they can do it. And then they work towards that. And the next time you follow up on that, and essentially then this whole more or less repeats again with the core competencies. And this is for me really where I think if you have this approach, if you can do this approach and bring this together with the Agile Kata, where essentially, because you are there as a coach with the team going through those steps about what is the challenge, where are we, what are the experiments. And then even while you run an experiment, run into problems there, maybe have to find, you can always be there and you can always apply these competencies and help them to surface their own answers and get out of this classical mindset. And this is really also where there's so many things for me actually, and I'm mumbling probably right now, but there's so many things coming together. This is also when I think along the lines of Carol Dweck with her growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Because if you have a fixed mindset, you always approach problems in the same way, or you don't even approach a problem because it feels uncomfortable. You think it might go wrong. But in a growth mindset, you seek a new challenge. You want to master new competencies. You want to get better at what you want to achieve. And you're okay to get feedback, which could be negative and something like that, but you build on top of that. And this is how you grow as a person. And I think this comes here also then really nicely together in that context. Now, for me, again, that's the perfect marriage. So going back to those 4 steps to get the direction of or the challenge. And this is for me really like this facilitation of the client growth. Challenge assumptions while maintaining the psychological safety, trust and safety, which is also then one of the competencies. And the next one, cultivate trust and safety. Create this environment where people and individuals feel secure to explore and innovate. And I think then also as this coach, you could also be this leader for the team. So around that, so that you can help them to get this bubble of safety, basically. And then once you have them, you help them to really understand the current condition. So think about this coaching mindset. What could we do to ourselves in order to become better? Where are we right now? I think along the lines of evoke awareness. And where do we want to be? Getting this clarity about actually there's a thing in between we need to bridge over to get to the other side to improve. And then thinking about what is the next target condition we can actually achieve meaningful. Again, this is about growth, but on a different level, on a smaller level. And then we all work together on that. And by doing this, we establish and we maintain this agreement that this is a good idea, that we believe into that and help stepping forwards. And then essentially, okay, how can we get there? This is really when you want to be present with the people all the time, ask those powerful questions, active listening, but also be ethical about supporting them and helping them and setting up those boundaries around that. And again, this is just like those 4 bullet points on there, but I think there's so much momentum, there's so much power if you approach this really from a proper coaching perspective, that it can help the people being involved with that much, much more. And so this is for me like this powerful framework, which really where scientific thinking meets the human development, how they can grow mentally, but also with their skills, with their mastery. And this is about individuals within your group, but also within an organization. And I think you could even apply Agile Kata for a whole organization. Where do we want to be as an organization in a couple of years? And where are we now? What does this mean for us? How can we work forward? How can we actually achieve that? So self-management and ownership. And it's really about a good kata coach cultivates clarity and the purpose and empowers the people who want to do that to get there. And you don't give the answers. And this is actually where the word coach is coming from, from a carriage, going back to when people had horses and they had the carriage, and then there was the coach in between. So yeah, you kind of weren't giving the direction. This was the guy back in the carriage, but you made sure everything is working correctly. This is, to my understanding, when I was told, this to what coach coming from. So you are not setting really the direction. I mean, they set it themselves, but through your questioning, through the language you're using as your tool, built on the core competencies, they discover what's meaningful for them. Again, and this is where you need to active listen, help them understand the underlying challenges, ask those powerful questions that stimulate deeper thought. And going back to what I just said before, sometimes you ask this one question and you really like, bang, this really is a home run, essentially, if you want to think along those lines. But also help them to challenge the assumptions. Maybe you think, okay, oh, that's an interesting thought. What do you help them to see an idea if it's too far, if it's too little, unrealistic, so that they can really go for something which is meaningful in their regard, so that they really have the growth which works and is attainable. And I think really, if you think about this approach guided through the ICF competencies, ensures that the coaches do not just do kata, but they truly develop the capabilities of the people he or she works with so that they take on ownership. And by doing this, and again, and this is where deliberate practice makes you really strong, because you keep on doing that, you keep on doing that. And at some point, you don't even have to think about it anymore because you grew that muscle memory. And actually, there's no memory in your muscles. That's a misnomer, but essentially, you have episodal. No, I think it's the wrong term, but it's something starting with E. But in your brain, there's something like specific routines. If you do them over and over again, you just do them blindly. So essentially, your brain tells your muscle or your body parts to do something without thinking about it. They were doing studies with people who had really badly Alzheimer's, and they were able to walk home from wherever you put them if it was on the same route, because the muscle memory essentially guided them. Put them somewhere else, they would be lost. But in the neighborhood, if the partner walks with them, they could find home, but not thinking about it, but the body basically telling them where to go, which is, I think, is an interesting thought. But anyway, I was distracted at the moment. This approach, again, going back to the ICF core competencies, that you get out of this just we do kata to, hey, we do this for a good reason, and we understand why we do that, and we reflect on that why we do that. And that makes it much more, it goes deeper. There's more focus in that. And that helps people to drive out better results, better outcomes for the users if you build products. And I think common pitfalls, what I see if you have no proper coaching in place, that you get those vague wish lists of undefined next steps. Oh, I can do this and we can do that. And oh, yeah, it feels good. It's a long list. It's comfortable. And I think it is called the iceberg phenomenon. And essentially, it tells us that we as human beings, we have the tendencies. Let's say we are facing a problem, and we tend to do things which we know will probably not fix the problem. It will help, but probably not fix the problem. But we still do it because we feel comfortable to do it, because we have practice in doing it. So that's the iceberg phenomenon. And I think this is when I think along the lines of classical project management approaches. We know there are issues with it, and we should probably approach it in a different way for certain circumstances. However, we know how to run projects, so that's why we do it. And another problem is often that we don't have clear problem statements. They really don't go deep enough. So if they're somewhat shallow, it's like hard. And again, I think this is where coaching comes into the picture, because I think it just ask pointed questions and hopefully make people see and go deeper, and often no clear defined outcomes, which we really need. Now, if you really go down the road of coaching, that really helps you to upgrade the process. You think much more, you analyze much more, and you get better focus on the outcomes you want to achieve, because you go forward and backward, and you keep on asking until the person or the team you work with, they realize, "Okay, that's it, that's good." And you can, now there's this, at the NLI, we talked about the face of insight. It's people, suddenly they start to smile. And it's like, what did you just think? You just had a revelation. And this is where you want to get them. And I think then they have their really good goal. But also ask for evidence. How would you know that you have been successful? What would change? What would you see if you would achieve that next target condition, or you achieve your challenge? And also ask, finding out if there are some assumptions along the ways. It's like, yeah, we can do this. Yeah. You can ask, is this realistic? Have you done this in the past? And so on. And then people will also kind of get a better understanding about where they really are, what's realistic, what's feasible, and yeah, what's a good stretch goal. Let's go for that. And but also sometimes people, they make those too safe or trivial experiments. Sure, they're good. You will learn from that, but yeah, they're somewhat shallow. They're not really helping you with that. And I think this is where, for me personally, this is really, since I have gone through the ICF training and everything, I approach conversations much more different. I feel much more confident in asking specific questions. And I think that in this regard, it's really valuable, because you have learned to ask those powerful questions to engage a deeper thinking and more impact in the people you work with. And then they will make better steps towards the target condition. Well, And this also helps you to safeguard from organizational gravity, how I like to call it, because at the end of the day, if something is being around for too long with not enough energy or you put into it, things fall back. They go back to the former status quo. So often we then fall back into hierarchical thinkings. We are going back to our rigid structures. But instead of going up to this problem solving and empowering individuals or solution bias, that we think in solutions and not problems we want to solve, which is an important aspect if we work in the product area. So coaching prevents us to just say, oh, let's do this, this will fix that. Do we really know? Maybe there's some experiments we should first find that. And maybe your next target condition shouldn't be a solution. It should be more like, that's a problem we're going to solve because we identified this as a problem and let's find a way to get there. And again, this is where coaching comes into the picture and going back to this project mindset, which I had mentioned a couple of times before. And I'm totally biased here. Absolutely. I agree. I come from a product mindset. I think in a product operating model when possible, not in a project operating model, and always learning and validating. And I think a product mindset also aligns really strongly with the growth mindset from Carol Dweck. So getting out of this is what we have to achieve as a solution, the fixed scope, into let's make a step, let's learn, let's reflect and go back with that. So you don't want to have all of that just as a checklist. We did this, but with coaching, it is more like a yes, we achieved that. Yes, we achieved that. And reflecting, and maybe, yeah, we achieved this, but actually didn't feel right. So let's talk about this. Let's find out what we could change there as well. And if you do this long enough, you build up this organizational or team resilience so that they become much, much better to cope with things around them. So I'm just recovering a little bit from a cold. So running the marathon probably suppressed my immune system for some time. And I think I caught something on my flight back on Monday. But anyway, I just talked about reflection. So I think this is one of the steps which often gets neglected. I see that often like in Kata, but also in other approaches like in Scrum, people say, why do we have to retrospective? For me, that's one of the most powerful elements because this is really where you stop, you take a deep breath, and then you self-reflect. And I think self-reflection is hard because you look into the mirror, and if you don't like the image in the mirror, yeah, but that's your reality. And then you need to do something about it. So essentially, taking this step back, having this analysis. And again, this is where you as a coach can help because this is where you are with the team, the person, and you can maybe just, how do you feel right now? Go off with that and then pick up on some words and go deeper and follow up with that. And this is how you realize, this is how you get to real insights. Then as a group, as an individual, say, wow, okay, yeah, that's interesting. So we just learned this and this. Maybe we could try out that. And great, there's the next step. Then maybe the next experiment already lined up for you. And this is really how you drive out new and more effective, better behaviors. And this is how we become better. This is how we improve our mastery, autonomy, mastery, purpose, if you think back to Dan Pink. So this ensures that this reflection drives our future actions in a better way. And we just don't keep on doing the same thing. And even if it doesn't work, we just keep on doing it because that's what we're being told to do. No, it's always about how can we become better and go for that, try it out. And if we fail, yeah, we fail. That's okay. But again, for this, you need this environment of trust and safety. So ICF core competencies, they cultivate trust and safety and they demonstrate in the right environment the ethical practices which are then present, and they create this safety net where people really are able to honestly reflect and maybe even say, this is my fault. I did this. I had good intentions, but it went wrong and I'm sorry about that. But I'm learning this from this. And this is really strong. This is really powerful. And this is how the team grows and becomes better over time. And now I talked a lot about the team and the individual, but I think it's also that the strategy of an organization can really benefit from that if you look at it from a higher level perspective, because what I often see is, and I have to say, strategy is easy, which it is not. But once you have the strategy, it's kind of, this is our strategy and you can explain it. But getting to the strategy so that you can explain it, that is the hard part. But once you have it, Great. But how do you make sure that this strategy, which is now easy to communicate, down onto the ground, so that people on the ground running can actually act on that on a tactical operational level? That's a big challenge. And I think this is where now the kata approach can really help. And sure, we all know that's what I'm convinced of is if you combine the kata approach with a good coaching approach, it's even better. So if you do this well, I think you get better alignment from your strategy down to the way for executions. You get a better cross-team coherence and a cross-functional team and all of the things we talk about. And it makes for you, if you are actually a leader, easier for you. So you don't have to worry less about all of these things because they will probably deliver better work because they're more focused. They know what they're supposed to do in a better way. And this also then allows you to scale this empirical decision making, where you just now the thing is there's this term called strategy deployment. So how can you make sure that the strategy we have, which was defined more further up in the organization, how can we make sure it's properly deployed within the organization? But once you start to act on it, things will happen, things will emerge, patterns will form. And this is emergent strategy. So this bubbles up, and then essentially strategy deployment and emergent strategy have to merge, essentially, have to be combined. And I think this is the last bullet point, what I want to emphasize here. So basically, you get this empirical decision making where you then take this information and maybe readjust some of your strategy ideas you had up here because you have suddenly new signal, new evidence about something needs to change. Now, if you do that without coaching, you often get local optimization and here a team and here a team. And as we all know about from Eckhoff with his 3 rules, that's not what you want, because if you only go for local optimization, you sub-optimize the whole system. But we want to have the system optimized. Often we then also see those cargo cult experiments where we just blindly do certain things and good problem framing, not even problem framing, probably more like solution framing. I should change that on the slide here. And basically cumulative, getting better as an organization. So coaching lifts the kata from operational improvements to really well done strategic advantage for the organization. And now kata coach, ICF coach, a quick comparison here is that on the left-hand side, I took this on here from Deming, the plan, do, study, act cycle, which is really important. That's what I really also think along all the time. But on the right-hand side, we have the iceberg model. And at the very bottom, so at the top, we have the events. This is what we see. But the events is only like the tip of the iceberg. That's why it's called the iceberg model. No surprise there. But at the very bottom, we have the mental models, our belief systems. We think this is right, we think this is wrong, or we think we have to do this, maybe to get promoted or something else. So all of that. And basically these mental models, they form the structure. Basically, we are building on top of that everything. And based on the structures we put in place, we then see patterns, and it's mostly behavioral patterns. Now, on these patterns, essentially, once you do that, these are then, when you act on those, these are the events we can observe. So often, if you observe events which are not right, don't change just the patterns or something like that, because that's the quick fix. If you think in systems thinking, that's the quick fix, which improves for a moment, but in the long run makes it even worse. You want to go deeper. You really want to see, okay, why are people doing it? What is happening in their heads? And again, this is where you as a coach could really help to surface that, make it transparent for the people or the people in the leadership to think, here we go. There's something else we should be actually changing. So now, as an agile coach, I think kata coach and as an ICF coach, you can really bring both of those elements together. And that will be really powerful, in my opinion. And this is the last slide, so that's it. But for me, the essence of a true agile transformation, or call it AI transformation or something else, but the essence of any transformation. So Agile Kata builds habits and coaching builds people. As they start to think in a different way. And when people grow, the system starts to change. And that's how you get a real transformation going. And you don't get this theater that, we do something. Curtain opens up, but no, it doesn't really work that well. It's really amateurish. But if you do this right, you get the right people. they understand it, they grow as people. And if you do this well, the system will change accordingly. And by doing that, hopefully you will really grow a healthy and strong organizational culture. So thank you very much. With that, I'm through and I'm happy to answer questions.